So Khabib gave his thoughts on a potential matchup between Arman Tsarukyan and Ilia Topuria, to where he said he gives Arman an 80% chance to beat Ilia, while Ilia, he's only got a 20% chance to beat Arman Tsarukyan. I was shocked when I saw this from Khabib. So we're going to talk about it. I'm going to react, give my thoughts on, a potential fight between Ilia and Arman, and also what Khabib had to say about this. And then also, we have Magomed Ankalaev, who did a little interview to where he basically welcomed the idea of a potential fight with Khamzat Chimaev. And those of you that have been watching the channel, I said, look, man, I don't think anyone in the middleweight division has the answers for Chimaev, but if Khamzat pursues a second belt, right? I feel like him going down to 170, I don't know that necessarily happens, given that he seems like he's really filled out into the, middleweight frame. He was having issues getting down to welterweight. I feel like that 205 move is something that just feels inevitable, man. It feels like we may see that at some point, and we all know the champion right now is Magomed Ankalaev. He's got a big fight coming up at UFC 320. With Alex Pineda, but you can't tell me that is not a super intriguing fight, man. And I said, listen, if anyone has, maybe the answers to beat Chimaev, I don't think it's anybody at middleweight. I think that it would be someone, specifically a Magomed Ankalaev at 205 pounds. And then lastly, we will discuss Bryan Battle, because he has a fight booked for Dirty Boxing Championship, and we're not really going to talk about that, but more so the fact that he was released from the UFC because he had missed weight numerous times. I'm going to react, give my thoughts to all of that. So first, let's start with this, man. Because when I saw this from Khabib, I'm like, okay, is Khabib trolling this at this point? Because he was out there, in the lead up to DDP versus Khamzat. He was like, look, man, I think Khamzat should just go out there and he should just box with DDP. He should keep it on the feet and just strike with Dricus du Plessis. And I'm like, Khabib, are we trolling? Are we trying to get DDP to think that it's going to be something it's not? I was just shocked from what I was hearing from Khabib. But then I kind of maybe understood a little bit what Khabib was saying, because he's like, listen, man, if you're going to go out there, rush to finish, burn yourself out, and you're going to, blow your gas tank early on, well, then as the fight plays out, that would tend to favor Dricus du Plessis, which is how a lot of people felt coming into the fight. So in hindsight, I understand kind of what he was saying, but also don't tell Khamzat Chimaev to kind of get away from what makes Khamzat, right? So that was something that a lot of people were kind of coming after Khabib for, was his take on how he would tell Khamzat to approach the fight. So then he says this: Khabib doesn't see Ilia Topuria having a chance against Arman Tsarukyan. Well, he didn't say that, but this is what he says. I believe right now the best lightweight is Tsarukyan. I'd say it's 80% to 20% in Arman's favor. We all know that the level of wrestling that Holloway and Charles Oliveira had, it's practically non-existent. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that, because we've seen Charles improve his wrestling skills. Now, we all know that it's not on the level of Arman Tsarukyan. I want to make that clear. Arman is definitely a better wrestler than Charles, but we still saw that Charles made some great improvements, to his wrestling game, especially a little bit later in his career. It's practically non-existent, but a guy who wrestles, Topuria hasn't faced that. He's only fought strikers. I know the UFC is cautious. They don't want to throw him into to Topuria too quickly right now. Topuria is a bigger star than Arman, but if Arman gets a big win, where can they hide him? They won't be able to. Now, I will go ahead and link this below. All of these little clips I will link below in the description. Because Khabib was basically saying, look, stylistically, Arman Tsarukyan on paper, he's the guy that presents the most challenges to Ilia Topuria in this weight class, right? Now, I've even said before, right, when Ilia Topuria, those clips were going around where he was doing the stream with Nelk, where he's like, I won't fight Arman Tsarukyan, right? Because the UFC and Dana White, they've been like, look, because he pulled out of, the Islam rematch, right? Because of the weight miss or potential weight miss, whatever went on there, right? It was a disaster to where Arman pulled out, Moicano had to step in, and, we weighed in as the backup at UFC 317, but we know Dana White and the UFC, they're probably going to hold that against Arman, right? We've kind of heard out there, Arman's going to have to win another fight. So I think Ilia was saying if the UFC basically goes back on their word of allowing Arman to then fight for the title right now, given what just happened where he had to pull out of a fight, Ilia's like, I'm just not going to do it. I'll vacate my title, right? Is basically what he was saying. But I've been critical in the aspect to Ilia of, Ilia knows that Arman Tsarukyan stylistically is his toughest fight in the division now that Islam Makhachev is gone, right? But here's the thing. Ilia Topuria wanted to leave featherweight. He was adamant about fighting Islam Makhachev, dude. He was adamant about fighting that guy, right? So, but I feel like there's these things that are kind of being bounced around of, well, wait a minute. if Arman Tsarukyan beats Ilia Topuria, that kind of ruins all the possible big opportunities that Ilia could have ahead, right? The potential move to welterweight to fight Islam or JDM or whatever it is. So it feels like Arman could be the guy that can get in the way and screw all of that up. That's what it feels like to me, right? And you know, for Khabib to say it's 80 to 20% in Arman's favor, I mean, I could not disagree more, man. And I love Khabib. He's one of my all-time favorites. I couldn't disagree more here. This, in my opinion, this is just a horrible take here from Khabib, right? It's his opinion, but I just completely disagree. I completely disagree, right? And I understand what he's saying stylistically. It seems like Arman has the answers. But look at how Arman matched up against Charles Oliveira. That was a close fight. Some people thought Charles won the fight. It was very close, man. Charles had Arman in some real danger, right? And I get it. Styles make fights. But I mean, on the feet, you know, come on, man. Ilia Topuria is as good as it gets. He's got elite boxing, dangerous power. Really, really good head movement, man, right? I mean, you know, 20 to 80, that's crazy, man. It's absolutely crazy. I would lean, you know, and say probably 60% Topuria, 40% Arman. Because I do believe, guys, like, I want to make that clear. Arman Tsarukyan, now that Islam, because I'm counting him as a welterweight, because he's moved up, he's fighting JDM, I believe, you know, out of the current lightweights, Arman is clearly the guy that seems like he would have the best shot at beating Ilia Topuria. Or because we saw in the Bryce Mitchell fight, Bryce was able to take him down. Right now, Ilia was able to get back up. He was able to hurt Bryce, and he was able to submit him. Right, so we've clearly seen that. We know about Ilia's ground game. Even in the Charles Oliveira fight, Charles tried to take him down, didn't work out. Ilia ended up on top. Right, and we saw Charles put Arman in some really bad positions, but I get it. Styles make fights, right? So you could say, well, Arman's, you know, the wrestler. Charles has the, you know, the jiu-jitsu, the way that clashes compared to Ilia, who's more of a striker. But I feel like people are continuing to overlook the ground game that Ilia has, man. Like, Ilia is really, really good grappling. He's very good on the ground. He has very good jiu-jitsu skills as well. So to say 80% Arman, I think, is crazy. You know, and then Arman, you know, he's mentioned Arman's a bigger guy in the lightweight division, and I get that there in terms of how stout Arman is, right? He is a big, strong guy for this weight class, and I do think that he is a unique challenge to Ilia Topuria, man. And I don't think that Ilia is super excited to fight a guy like Arman Tsarukyan. He would rather fight someone like Justin Gaethje, who's a little bit older, is reckless with the striking to where those counter opportunities are available. Someone like a Paddy Pimblett who, you know, sticks his chin in the air, right, and hasn't beat anyone at the top of the division. Right, so in terms of Ilia Topuria, like, I could understand, you know, not necessarily wanting the Arman fight. And given the fact that he missed weight, you know, the UFC's been like, you got to come back and prove yourself. And Ilia's just kind of, I guess, reiterating what the UFC is saying. But make no mistake about it, man. Ilia knows that Arman is the hardest matchup now that Islam is out of the weight class. But to say 80 to 20%, in my opinion, is just blasphemy. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. I would lean, you know, and that's the thing that I've said before, is I believe that Ilia can beat Arman Tsarukyan, man. Like, I would favor Ilia to win that fight, but it's still a very hard matchup, and that's the thing. That's the thing, and that's kind of what Khabib is saying here. The UFC's cautious. They don't want to throw him to Topuria too quickly right now. Topuria is a bigger star than Arman, which is true. Even though Arman's name's really been out there, right? He's been training with Khamzat. He was in his corner, right? And Arman's got a pretty big fan base as well, right? And he's been, you know, doing a good job on social media, posting the, you know, the little reel where he's running after a duck and stuff. Right, but if Arman gets a big win, you know, there's no question that he would be next in line. So we're going to see how this whole thing plays out. So, but hearing Khabib's thoughts on this, I just thought it was interesting. 80 to 20%, you know, and I get a little bit of Khabib's, you know, kind of in that position where it's like, you know, Topuria and Islam, right? Their names have been attached to each other. That huge fight that we're all hoping eventually happens. So it's like he doesn't want to give Ilia too much credit because, you know, it's kind of like, you know, Islam and Ilia are kind of like, you know, they might be on the collision course here. And again, Islam's beating Arman, right? So if Arman goes out there and beats Ilia Topuria, it makes, you know, Islam look really good. But at the same time, it's like, well, but if Ilia goes out there and crushes Arman, you know, it's going to be interesting, man, because I got to tell you, if Arman can't get the fight to the floor, he's in trouble, right? I know on the feet, Arman's got good striking. It's underrated. He's got power in his hands, good kicks, good elbows, good knees, right? He's got the wrestling to where theoretically he should be able to give Ilia problems, but I just don't think it's that easy, man. Ilia's got that low center of gravity. He's powerful. His boxing is super dangerous. And, you know, and Khabib's saying, well, he's fought guys like Volkanovski, guys like Holloway. These guys are not, they're not wrestlers. And no, they're not. They're strikers, but man, are they high level. And the way that he's tactically broken them down. right? And then Charles Oliveira, we saw, I know that it's Michael Chandler, but we saw him put on essentially kind of a grappling clinic against Michael Chandler. We've seen throughout the later part of the career, Charles Oliveira's ground game has gotten much better, man. It has. It's gotten significantly better. I'm not saying it's on the level of someone like Arman, right? He's got a much more dangerous submission game than Arman. But in terms of the wrestling, there's no question that Arman does present that kind of style. But to say 80 to 20%, I think is crazy. Craziness. Considering that Arman went tooth and nail with Charles Oliveira while Ilia went out there and starched him in the very first round. And I get it. Styles make fights, right? That's MMA math doesn't always add up. But 80 to 20, man, sounds like a little bit of hating or something going on here, man. And I know that this is his opinion and his take, right? Maybe there's something Khabib is seeing here, but I'm looking at the tape. I don't see what he's saying. To a degree, I understand the stylistic matchup. Arman can throw a bunch of different things at you. We haven't seen Ilia against a super dominant grappler per se, right? Because Charles is kind of a guy who relies on his striking quite a bit, getting rocked, wobbled, then coming back and finding a way to submit you. So I understand stylistically where this is coming from. But 80 to 20%, acting like Ilia didn't KO Volkanovski at 45. I know Islam did, but that was at 55. No one's done that to Volk at featherweight, right? Then to go out there and do it to Max Holloway. We've never seen Max Holloway get KO'd. And we've seen how good Max Holloway's been, right? When he fought Gaethje before the Ilia fight, and then what he just did to Dustin Poirier. And then to go out there and starch Charles in the first round and have success on the ground and defend against Charles Oliveira. So I just don't think that this is a I don't know. I disagree completely here. 80 to 20%, I would say 60% Topuria, 40% Arman. Because Arman does present those challenges, man, stylistically for sure. But to say 80 to 20, I just disagree, man. It kind of sounds like Khabib's kind of playing a little bit of the game because Ilia's been out there talking a lot, running his mouth, being like, I want to fight, Islam. I'll take him down. What's Islam's favorite? Submit him. I'll submit him in submission. I'll submit him in front of Khabib. So there's kind of a little bit of that game going on here. But to say 80 to 20, man, I don't agree with it whatsoever. I thought that this was horrible. This was a horrible take here. I think it's 60% Topuria, 40% Arman at this point. So, like I said, man, stylistically, there's no question that Arman does present the challenges to Ilia that maybe we necessarily haven't seen yet. But to say 80 to 20, dude, that is a crazy number, man. That's like almost giving Ilia almost no chance. You're still giving him a chance because you're saying 20, but 20%? A guy that's been this good, that's knocking everybody out, that has crazy power in his hands, and in order for Arman to get a hold of him, Ilia's got that low stance. Ilia, we've seen how good of a grappler he is. Even if Arman takes him down, he's going to be able to control him. I know Arman's got good ground and pound, but if Arman can't take him down, keep him underneath of him, Ilia Topuria is significantly better than Arman on the feet, man. I know that Ilia is maybe more one-dimensional because he's basically all boxing, but that boxing's the best in the sport, in my opinion. I'm not so sure that Arman has the answers. And Arman's been out for a while. I know he's training hard, was part of, Chimaev's camp for 319, but I don't know, man. I don't know. And like I said, I definitely agree that Arman would stylistically, right now in the lightweight division, now that Islam is gone, he is the most challenging fight for Ilia Topuria. So I understand why Ilia would be trying to be like, I kind of want this guy, that guy, because UFC's got big plans for Ilia. He's one of the biggest stars in the UFC right now. And a loss to Arman Tsarukyan, that hurts the stock. No question. The Ilia Topuria stock, that is. Right? So it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. I just thought that was absolutely crazy. 80 to 20, I don't agree. All right. Magomed Ankalaev is willing to fight Khamzat Chimaev if he moves up to 205. I'm still in this division. If someone wants to move up and test my weight class, I always say welcome. If he moves up, no problem. Now, I've said before that I don't know if this fight is going to happen because I've seen, Khamzat and Magomed Ankalaev hanging out together, right? The Ahmad MMA club. I don't know if these guys are, friends or kind of the whole ordeal there. But what I do know is this. Magomed Ankalaev sound willing to make this fight happen if this is something that the UFC looks to do. Now, here's the thing. I've said before in the middleweight division, we got kind of a tournament going on, right? If Nasruddin Imavov versus Kyle Bahalio, we got that going on in Paris coming up. We have RDR versus Fluffy Hernandez, and it sounds like kind of whoever has the more impressive win in those fights is going to fight Khamzat Chimaev next, and maybe the end of the year, but probably next year, right? And then it sounds like after that, maybe we get to see Khamzat make some sort of big move where he looks to move up a weight class, right? I've said before, I feel like Ankalaev moving up if Aspinall could beat Gane. I mean, I feel like that would be a crazy fight if Ankalaev could beat Pineda in the rematch, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if we see Ankalaev eventually move up or something like that to the heavyweight division. But if this fight were to happen, I believe that Magomed Ankalaev has the best shot at beating Khamzat Chimaev. Out of everybody at middleweight and everybody in the light heavyweight division, there's one guy I think that can beat the Khamzat that we are seeing at middleweight right now, and that is Magomed Ankalaev. Now, would I pick Ankalaev to beat Chimaev? That I don't know, right? I'm not going to make a prediction on that, right? Because I would really I gotta see some things, man. I got to see some things because we know that Ankalaev has a really good ground game, which is kind of where this idea comes from of, it feels like Magomed would be able to stop the takedowns of Chimaev, or not stop the takedowns. I think he would get taken down, but I feel like he would get back up. Or would he? Right? Because Khamzat Chimaev's grappling seems to be on a different level, man. And the speed, the technicalities, the athleticism, I feel like it would be a step ahead of Ankalaev. But the catch is always this. If Khamzat Chimaev cannot do what he does, and the fight does get stuck on the feet, Magomed Ankalaev is a better striker than anyone that Khamzat has fought. Ankalaev is super precise on the feet, dude. Very, very precise. And he's got good grappling of his own. But is it on the level of Khamzat Chimaev? I would say no. But is it good enough to get back to his feet? Is it good enough to stuff some takedowns? Because he's going to get taken down, I would imagine, right? I feel like Khamzat will take him down. But I feel like Ankalaev, I could see him working back to his feet, man. And then if he gets back to his feet and he can stop those next attempts from Chimaev and from him chaining those things together, Ankalaev has a clear advantage on the feet. This would be a fascinating fight, dude. An absolutely fascinating fight. I don't know if we're ever going to see it, because we're going to see how things play out, right? I feel like Khamzat's going to stick around at middleweight for a little while. I feel like Ankalaev wants to defend his belt. And then maybe if he can rattle off a few wins, maybe an opportunity presents itself for him to go up and fight someone like Aspinall or something. I don't know. But stylistically, man, Khamzat versus Ankalaev, I think that this is one of the best fights the UFC could make in terms of like a champ versus champ fight right now, stylistically, right? Because I know Ankalaev's not the biggest star out there, right? Khamzat is one of the biggest stars in the sport, if not the biggest right now. So this would be a huge fight, man. Stylistically, it doesn't get much more intriguing than this one. But it just feels like Khamzat's grappling is on a different level. And as good as Ankalaev is on the ground, he is more of a striker. He is. So I just don't know if he would have the answers for Chimaev's ground game. And considering that we saw Khamzat go out there, go a hard 25 minutes with DDP, show that he could go out there and control you, can advance position, can dominate you over the course of 25 minutes, had over 21 minutes of control time against a big, strong guy like DDP. It's impressive, man. We all know he can finish guys early. We know he's got power in his hands, but it's the grappling of Chimaev that would be super intriguing to see if Ankalaev could solve it. What a crazy style matchup this would be, man. It'd be an interesting one. I don't know if we ever see it, but if we did, like I said, if anyone, in my opinion, has the best shot at beating Khamzat Chimaev, I think it's Magomed Ankalaev at 205, right? So we know Chimaev's been saying, he was saying in the lead up to 319, maybe I go to welterweight. That belt seems intriguing, 205. So he's definitely eyeing a move to another weight class at some point, trying to win that second title. It'd be a crazy stylistic matchup, man. And I got to be honest, if Ankalaev, I don't know if he could stop the takedowns. And if he can't, he's definitely going to lose the fight, obviously. But if he can stop those takedowns, because we know Ankalaev is a good grappler and can keep the fight on the feet, he definitely holds an advantage there. What a fascinating matchup that would be, man. I was kind of surprised by this, to hear that he would be open to this, But again, big star in Chimaev, stylistically be a crazy fight. That'd be a big one for legacy for both guys if we ever get that one. Last but not least, Bryan Battle was recently released from the UFC after he failed to make weight for UFC 319. He was supposed to be fighting Nursultan Ruziboev, and look, this comes of no surprise to me. Look, I had been calling after Bryan Battle missed weight on weigh-in day. I think he weighed in at like 190 pounds, which, you had to be at 186, right? Because it wasn't a championship fight. So it could be 185, 186, whatever. And I just knew that the UFC was not going to let this slide, right? Because of the fact that he was having some weight issues at welterweight. You move up to middleweight. Now, keep in mind, right, obviously, welterweight to middleweight is not a 10-pound gap like when you're going from bantamweight to featherweight or featherweight to lightweight. This is a 15-pound gap. And you might say, whoa, it's only 5 pounds. That's a big deal, man. Having an extra 5 pounds is a big deal. That is a lot. So that should theoretically basically make it almost impossible for Bryan Battle to miss weight. If you can't make 170, you're having these problems and you're at least getting into the, upper 170s, low 180s. I mean, it should have been a cakewalk to middleweight. Instead, it shows up at 190 pounds. So that's his third that was his third weight miss in the UFC, man. Right? You just can't have it. And, against Randy Brown, right? Had the weight miss, right? And he won that stinky split decision over Randy Brown. Right? Where I picked Battle to win the fight, but I honestly thought Randy won. Right? And then back at Gabe Green, when he fought Gabe Green, missed weight for that one. Right? And whenever you're missing weight, right? And it was an impressive performance against Gabe Green. Going out there against Randy Brown, it was a stinker. But when you're missing weight and you're holding someone up against the fence and you're utilizing your size, your strength, whatever it is to neutralize them and you're missing weight, it's not a good look. It's not a good look, right? But then he had a decent track record there against AJ Fletcher, the Ange Losa fight where, it was a no contest. Losa was saying whatever it was with his eye. It seemed like he was looking for a way out. Then goes out there against Kevin Gisay and got a nice finish, man. And that was a huge win for Bryan Battle, man. Got on the microphone. Felt like he was really kind of marketing himself well, playing the Butcher character. Right? He had the long curly hair, whatever, on The Ultimate Fighter. Comes off, changes the dumb nickname of, Pooh Bear or something? To becoming the Butcher. Dyeing his hair blonde. Was really leaning into the Butcher character, man. And then just couldn't get it together on the scales, man. 3 total weight misses is inexcusable. It just is, man. And it sucks because Bryan Battle, to me, he was one of the guys that was really starting to bring some excitement in that welterweight/middleweight division, man. I'm not saying that he would have been a champion, but he was a name that was really starting to kind of pop out. He was racking together some nice wins, was showing some good striking on the feet, solid grappling. Seemed like he kind of, the marketing he was doing for himself, kind of playing the bad guy when he went to, when he fought Kevin Gisay, right? So disappointing from Bryan Battle, man, because it's just such a letdown. It's such a letdown. This guy was on The Ultimate Fighter, and it's the fact that the UFC can no longer rely on you, man. And people are like, well, Ortega just missed weight against Sterling, but Brian Ortega had basically been saying, I want to fight at lightweight. And the UFC, for whatever reason, they kept pushing the featherweight factor, trying to get him to fight at featherweight. But so when a fighter's like, I need to move up, man, there's clearly something going on, right? And Brian Ortega has accomplished much more than someone like Bryan Battle in the sport. But this was just essentially 3 strikes and you're out. And I feel like the feather in the, not the feather in the cap, but, the last straw was the fact that the UFC's probably sitting there thinking, this is a no-brainer. Just send him up to middleweight. Extra 15 pounds. We shouldn't have no issues here. And he misses weight by 4 or 5 pounds. It's crazy, man. And I was looking forward to that fight. Ruziboev versus Battle. That was a big fight for the weight class. Well, not big fight, but two prospects. Guys that are looking pretty good, man. Disappointing from Bryan Battle because now he's going to be fighting in dirty boxing, and good for him that he's because he was supposed to fight back at 319. So, what is this, a couple weeks later? So he's going to get to, get in there and compete, make some money for himself. This is a big drop off. I know dirty boxing's got some pop to it or whatever. It ain't the UFC. We all know that. To see a guy go from The Ultimate Fighter, seem like he's kind of figuring out his persona, right? Getting on the microphone, being fun, being entertaining, going out there kind of playing the bad guy, so to speak, and then missing weight 3 times in your rather short UFC stint is inexcusable. And then to go up an extra 15 pounds and miss the weight is just insane. It just is, man, and it sucks because Bryan Battle was a guy that he was starting to gain some steam. Brian, it's not to say that we won't see him in the UFC again, but I don't know, man. When you show and you prove that you're unreliable, this was such a huge fumble by Bryan Battle. Huge fumble by Bryan Battle. You're in the biggest promotion. You're gaining some steam for yourself. You had a big fight with Nursultan Ruziboev. And you go out there and you miss weight for the 3rd time after moving up 15 pounds. It's crazy. Absolutely crazy. Super disappointing. And like I said, absolutely the UFC should have gotten rid of Bryan Battle. 100%, man. 100%. And I was like, you shouldn't be, because at first it sounded like the Ruziboev versus Battle fight was still going to go through, even though Battle missed weight, and then eventually they waved it off. But I was like, you can't be rooting for Bryan Battle in this fight against Nursultan. Bryan Battle, that would have been his 3rd weight miss. Well, it was his 3rd weight miss, but if they allowed that fight to go through, it would have been like, this guy missed weight again. And then it comes off as you're missing weight and you're getting some sort of advantage over your opponents. Although I picked Ruziboev to be able to beat Bryan Battle, but still, missing weight for the third time, inexcusable. You're a professional, man. This is your job. When you're a professional, like Bryan Battle, coming off the Ultimate Fighter, having some fights in the UFC, you are obviously a professional. Showing up and making the weight is part of your job. And the fact that he was unreliable to do it, it was inexcusable, and I knew it was a matter of time before the UFC was going to cut him. That's the bottom line. Right? So I know people were like, why didn't they cut Ortega? They cut Battle. I mean, totally different thing. Brian Ortega been asking to move up a weight class. Right? He's a guy that's accomplished a lot in the UFC so far compared to someone like Bryan Battle. 3 strikes and you're out. 3 strikes and you're out. And going up 15 pounds. Like if Bryan Battle, or if Ortega missed weight at 45 and they sent him to 55 and he missed weight there, and then it's like, oh, okay. Yeah, I still don't think that they would get rid of him, right? Because comparing Ortega to Battle, I mean, it's not even a comparison. It's disappointing. It's disappointing, but I knew that this was coming, and Bryan Battle missing weight 3 times, completely inexcusable, and to go up an extra 15 pounds and miss again is honestly pathetic. So hopefully for Bryan Battle, he can figure out the weight cutting issue because he's clearly got something going on there. I don't know if he goes to the PFL, makes his way back into the UFC. It'll be interesting to see how this thing plays out for Bryan Battle. Just a big fumble on the side of Bryan, man, getting cut by the UFC. But if you guys enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Let me know what you think down in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you do not miss an upload. I would appreciate it. See you next time.